Welcome back to our Managing Your Finances in a COVID-19 Crisis series. This is the second part of the two-part series. So glad that you're able to join us. This week, I'm thanking you so much for the questions that came in. I was able to incorporate a lot of those questions into so I can try to address those. And I will also take some time to address some specific questions that actually did come. So last week, we talked about creating and moving to an emergency budget and also where you can get help. This week, we want to look at the last three bullet points. So utilizing your emergency fund, returning to what we consider the new normal, and protecting your mental and your physical health, which is very important in this time. So if we just look at utilizing our emergency fund, given that we live in a hurricane-prone region, an emergency fund is something that should almost come natural to us because we are always used to things that could not go the way we actually planned or budgeted for. So it's not something that should be brand new to us, but let's talk a quick bit about how we actually set this up and what the fund is, how we set it up, and how it can be used. So this is really a crisis planning fund. Generally about 3 to 6 months of your expenses. So you know what your expenses are. We talked about expenses in the first session, but you know what your expenses are in your normal environment. It's really looking at that and planning and setting aside. Now these are the important ones, not necessarily all of the expenses that you have. So the ones that are mandatory, I would almost call. So we talked about those two being things that sort of keep roof over your head and food in your stomach. What you should do with these funds is place them in investments that are not readily accessed. And use them only for emergency purposes. So when we talk about not easily accessed, this could be a number of things. You've got government securities, you've got mutual funds, you've got brokerage accounts, all high-level things, or you can even place them in an account that you have very little access to. But the key here is that you do not use them. They're here for emergency purposes. It's probably too late to set up that emergency fund for this crisis, but of course, if you actually have one, accessing it is exactly what you should be doing now if you have the need to. You're really using this fund sparingly, and like I said before, it's for mandatory payments. So you're thinking about things that, again, over your head, your shelter, your sustenance, and all the things that come with shelter. Once we're out of this crisis, I'm sure we can take much more time to talk about setting up that emergency fund and how you can better manage it. Don't want to take too much time in this, but that's just the use of the emergency fund should you have one or in the future think that you actually need one. You need one. This concept of returning to the new normal, right? We continue to hear people say the new normal. Things will never go back to where they were. Well, this is true. So while this is true, we need to, let's talk a little bit about how we can get to that new normal or whatever we should be expecting. I don't think that any of us, even certain when we would have the liberties that we had before, right? Like being able to assemble in church. We're right now having a we have a virtual church environment, visiting our family members, our friends, things of that nature. I also don't expect from a financial position that we would continue some of the things that we used to do even before this. So looking at this crisis, a lot of things probably will change for us. But let's talk about this normal. So many of us would have seen this one slide this week that the Prime Minister spoke about in Parliament. And then it started to go across, through WhatsApp and, like I like to call it, the internets. It was widely shared this week, and it was really on the government's reopening of the economy, which of course has a direct reflection on our pocketbooks, and that's exactly what we're talking about now, our finances. So if you look at this, it's interesting if you see phase 3 talks about beginning the new normal, and a lot of things are included in there. But even as you look at phase 3 and you see the new normal, there's still some words that are jumping out at you, right? Limited, manage, strict, no more than. So even with a new normal, we seem to see that coming out of this COVID environment, there are going to be some things that are not going to be any which way or any way they were before. And from the government's point of view, if you would have seen this, so while we're looking at returning to the new normal, I guess we're still ahead, because we're somewhere between phase 1A and 1B. If you take a look at those, I guess those different phases, you soon realize that some things were actually in and B, and if you read B, you say, wait a minute, that's not happened yet. But we're somewhere between 1A and 1B. But coming out of this crisis, a couple of things that I want you to think about. A return to normalcy, I guess, post-crisis, it doesn't mean mere restoration of your previous situation. but it should lead to us establishing some new order in our lives and in our finances that allows us to look at what was previously deemed impossible as attainable. So let's talk about how we could do a couple of those things. Number one here, you don't want to do things that prove ineffective for your finances before the crisis. A lot of us have had time to sit down and reflect on what we could have done that we didn't do. So good. All those things that we talked about are the things now that you probably even want to write down and start to do and make sure that we don't repeat what we call the sins of the past. Begin budgeting and ensure that savings is included in your plan. Tithe. We have all of the other mandatory, your mortgage, your rent, sustenance. Set a line item up for savings. A good savings account, I guess, or a good savings is probably between 20 to 30% of your monthly income. Now look, everybody is not necessarily at the same place. So if 10 works for you, if 5 works for you, but it's actually about getting in the discipline or establishing that discipline of saving, trust me, it becomes very important. Set up your emergency fund, which we just talked about. So now I'm telling you saving, but then set up the emergency fund. Like, how do I do both of them? I'll tell you. So saving is one thing, so that's systemic. The emergency fund, some of us get bonuses, say almost around Christmas time. Take it to tithe. But what we find is all the things that we had no real need for, becoming very relevant. So examples like that, if you get excess funds, or even if you take on something on the side, those are the things to help you set up your emergency fund as you move on. Ensure that you repay your contractual debt. So some people have stopped debt at this time. Some of the creditors that we spoke about in the last session have allowed you to stop debt. So as you continue, make sure that those things that you've signed for the most part, those things that can affect your credit. And that's key as well. When I say affect your credit, right now we may not think that credit may be that important, but even coming up very shortly, we've got a credit bureau on stream, and with that bureau on stream, it will actually collect all of your information. And as it's collecting all of your information, you want to ensure that the creditors have good things to say about you in terms of helping that score. So make sure you would have already contacted them, but make sure that you paid that debt first. A lot of things are coming, but make sure that you go ahead and pay those in a systematic way. And continue to avoid what we call easy credit during your period of rebuild. I won't be surprised if we have changes in interest rates, but if we do, credit may even appear to be cheaper. While credit is cheaper, know that while it's available to you, it shouldn't always be the first option. A number of us have credit cards, not the debit ones, the credit cards. So be careful with how we max those out and how we take out additional ones if we find situations where people are trying to give us more debt. I think this one is very important. It's not financial, but it very much will help you in this time. I want to talk about keeping your mind and body. So it's really protecting your mental and your physical health. So focus on what you can control and not the things that you can't. At the end of the day, there's a silver lining. We all know that trouble don't last long, right? So focus on the things that are positive. That may be difficult if the situation for you is not necessarily what you may deem favorable, but keep a positive outlook. It's very important. Take the time to connect with family and friends. Social distancing doesn't necessarily mean social isolation and loneliness. It's a big difference. So while we're being physically distant, we don't have to be socially isolated or even socially distant, which is much different from I guess, demonstrating social distance or physical distance. So reach out. Give the people that you haven't spoken to a call, a WhatsApp call, a video chat. Just take the time to reach out. So like for me, this week I actually took a couple of days and I wrote down 5 names and I said I will contact these people. And as I was talking to my friends, they were surprised to even hear, or if I'd call an aunt that I've been spoken to. You'd be surprised to know how the situation that you think that you're in may not quite be as bad. Like they say, whenever you think you have it bad, someone may have it worse. But that's not even what you're dwelling on. You're just really reaching out to people. And it helps your mind and your soul as well. Do some of this housework. So think about that spring cleaning. Hurricane season is coming right up. So making sure that you've got your area cleared. It takes you out of the house. It gives you a different focus. It gives you something to do. It's some busy things that helps the day go by, but they're also constructive things. Some of those do-it-yourself projects around the house. So we've got some of the hardware stores open again, and I guess some other places where you can actually go. So we had those long lines again, right, of everybody just back at the store trying to get some items. I'm not encouraging you to go on the line if you must, but again, if that will actually further the cause of helping some things around the house and getting your mind off perhaps what's going on and allay your fears, I definitely encourage it. Focus on healthy foods and exercise in the lockdown. Oh, this one is very interesting. I'm sure we found ourselves doing a lot of things that we haven't done. We've been doing a lot of cooking. That's good. And I don't think I've ever seen more banana bread than in the past. I don't know what it is about these bananas, but everybody making something banana. So a lot of these banana breads are coming. So get in the kitchen, do a little more. But while you're doing that, make sure you focus on the foods that are really going to help. Be careful of all the sugars in the food, the sugars in your drinks. I found even at this time that a good deal of the food stores actually have some pretty decent discounts on fruits. I don't know about the vegetables, but I even see with the fruits. So if you're getting those sugars, make sure you get you some good sugar as you move about, so you don't come out of here much heavier than you came into the lockdown. And remember, get that exercise. While you're locked down, you are not locked up. Right. So you can actually get on the outside during the week when we're not on our full lockdown. Get into the yard, get into your neighborhood if you can, and just do some walking, do some running, get your mat out. You will be much more happier for it. And this is another thing that I think is very important. This last point, I remained informed and limit information fatigue and constant negative news. You know, it seems that each day we got a new wave of information. Before you turn on social media and look at post after post relating to this coronavirus ordeal, how about you turn on some of those reliable sources? Because I promise you, like for some people, if WhatsApp didn't say it, it's not gospel. And interestingly enough, if you look at some of the things that come from WhatsApp, you could easily go right to Google, you know, the new encyclopedia online, and just type the story in, and you'd find that a lot of these things that are passed around are debunked. Don't get yourself too caught up on all that's going on 5G. I've seen interesting things, 5G, and I see this interesting, what was it this week? I think it was some tower with a plant, and now these people are watching us, and they're just passing on the radiation. Be very careful with these things, because at the most time it may actually drive you a little mad. And you really want to remain focused on things that are going to uplift at this time. And stay informed. But while I'm saying stay informed, also take the breaks. Not so much is going to happen in a day if you decide to turn off the TV and just binge. And I mean like the opposite way, not do it. But if you actually want to binge, there are lots of things that you can do. Netflix, that's something that's very, that's come up this way. If you actually have access to Hulu, where you can actually watch some shows, I'd encourage you as well to binge. Just take your mind off sort of what's going on, and you may soon realize that you're keeping your mind and body all intact. So that's really the end, and I just wanted to end, I guess, on a lighter point, so we can know that at the end of this, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And there are some things that we could even do now to help us get out, but make sure that you keep your mind and your body fit. I thank you for the questions, and that's where I'll move into now. There were a couple of questions that I wanted, I guess, to address to everyone, as they did come in. I took care of them, some of them in the presentation, but I think these are a couple that I actually wanted to single out and just give you some real-world advice. Here goes number one. This one says, my bank has a deferral plan. Should I apply for this assistance? So the short answer here is, it depends on your situation. We may all be in this boat, together, but while we're in this boat together, we may not all be sitting in the same seat. And I think that's very important for everybody to appreciate, for me to appreciate, for you to appreciate. I may have it better, I may have it worse, but all of us, while we are going through all of this together, we are not all necessarily, in that proverbial same boat. If your income has been impacted during this crisis, reach out to your banks and determine what you qualify for. And if you can reach out to them and determine what you qualify for, also understand the plans that they're offering. All the plans are not the same across banks. You could actually have, I guess, loans with more than one bank. They're not necessarily the same. And you also have options in terms of which option you can take. In some instances, you go ahead and, I guess, pay anything deferred over a period of time. You can pay it as a lump sum. It's all up to how you take a look at this. Also be very careful, because some banks have actually automatically deferred your payments. I had that situation this week. So you may also want to look on your account, because if you're in a situation where you are able to pay, and I do encourage you to continue paying if you are able to pay. But if you're in that situation, ensure that you look at your account. And ensure that if they are meant to be taking payments out, the payments are actually going through. And you can contact them as well, because some banks, like I said, have automatically deferred you. I had a situation where I was automatically deferred, and I never asked them to defer me. But this was really for the sake of trying to ensure that they were able to keep their numbers down from the people who they expected were going to come in. Here goes another question. My bank has given me cash back on my loan. What should I do with it? Okay, so this is an interesting one. Just know that nothing is free. So there's no such concept as a free lunch. So while they've given you cash back, my question is, how is the bank able to give me cash back if I didn't put cash in? Or maybe I did put cash in, and that's why they're able to give me cash back. I've realized that in some instances, they've done this for certain classes of workers. If the bank is giving you cash back and it's something that you don't need, let's say again, if you're not affected in this time, I would encourage you to return the cash. But of course, if you've got the issues in the household and or the financial issues in the household, and this will actually help you out, you can keep it. But just know that you are going to pay this back. And if you think about it, cash back is almost like a cash advance. If you have a credit card and you ever use your credit card, do you remember the amount of fees you actually paid on that cash advance, as opposed to just swiping it the normal way it should be used? Very similar, I'm sure, these cash plans are going to come back to haunt us in the event that we are using them in the instance we don't necessarily need them or need them as much as we've been given. Another question, and I think this is the last one that I actually took. Once we return to normal, what are some good saving plans? I think this is very important as well, because people are looking at the silver lining coming out of all of this, and that's really good. As I said before, no two people in the same situation. So what may be appropriate for me may not be appropriate for you. Spoke just earlier about how much I would encourage you to save if you can. That's between 20 to 30. But you know something? That's something that one person may be able to do, but you may just be able to do 5. Again, it's up to you, but get into the habit of doing it. Know your level of discipline and whether you will save or not. So what am I saying here? In some instances, some of us we will save because we are disciplined. Some of us will say that we're going to, but never do. So if you fall in that bucket where you say you're going to and you never do, then force yourself to do it by doing some things that are very much, some of them are even free. Like I'd encourage you to open up an account, have a standing order go from one account to the one that you're saving. Don't even give yourself access to it via ATM, because as long as you have the access, when something comes up that you think you need, but it's really probably something you want, you'll find your way going right to that account, as opposed to, say, for example, for me, I've got one of those accounts that I have absolutely no access to ATM, and I dread going into that bank. It's probably one of the slowest banks ever. So if I don't have access to it, I'm literally going to have to go stand in a line and sign a form. It's just not going to happen. So because I probably understand my level of discipline, and I'm not saying that I'm ill-disciplined, but I understand my level of discipline, and because I understand that I've done some things to force myself really to saving. Some of the other things you can think about for savings plans, they're a little more sophisticated. We don't have like the most active stock market in the Bahamas, but if you're not necessarily savvy, there are people who are able to be savvy for us. So you've got some brokerage accounts. I can think of ones with like C-File or Fidelity, Leno. You can give them a call and see how you can set up, and you don't always need tons of initial investment to be able to do this, because they work with you. Of course, there's going to be a brokerage fee, because they have to get paid some way, but while there's a brokerage fee, just know that your money is making money. Also, credit union savings plans. Again, one of those ways to force you at saving. If you've got, and they generally have higher interest rates from a saving point of view than you will generally find a bank having. Because those time deposits it's almost like the bank is charging you for keeping your money at this point, although it's really a situation where they are able to use it over and over. I also encourage people to use pension plans as a saving option. My dad jumped out at me because he said, My Lord, would you stay on one job? Yes, Dad, I'm a semi-millennial. We're on a job, but it might not be the same one all the time. So even before you're able to vest in some instances, and this is really for my younger crowd, even before you're able to vest, you may be gone because a better opportunity comes up. But what will not change is if you have your own personal pension plan and you are able to continue putting funds into that pension plan irrespective of where you are, because you can join the plan at your work and they'll put the money away for you, but if you leave and you haven't even invested, take that money and put that into lump sum in your pension plan as well. Nothing's getting easier from a financial point of view, and even if we take a look at NIB, just look at the strain that NIB just recently had with the unemployment benefits. Let's talk about how much they would have actually set up even for that from a budgetary point of view. So if you get into that habit, it'll be pretty good. Government registered stock, that was an issue this week. I think it's now closed. But this is another way. They have high interest rates, well, higher than normal for the most part. So you can have short-term or long-term, and for individuals, they encourage you to do that because they want to be able to spread the wealth around as opposed to just using all the time. A lot of companies who use this as an option. And then there's that good old bank saving deposit. Or, that time deposit, a fixed deposit. They don't pay much, but at least you could see your money sitting right there all the time. And you're still able to break them. So I don't necessarily like that, but it's one of those things where it's easier to just jump in and just pay a penalty and just get out. And one thing that is so practical, act like you're broke. So when we think about it, right, at this point right now, we're not spending a lot of that discretionary income because there aren't a lot of places for you to really spend it. Think about entertainment, that's down. I mean, physical entertainment, because of course you can pay for a lot of things online. You're thinking about personal upkeep, your hair, your nails, some of the other things that we spend some of the funds with. Like I literally just learned how to do this little shape-up thing here. I always knew how to cut my own hair, but now I find that my barber fee may actually go down because I'm able to do this. There are things that we're able to do, so as you do them, and you're learning a lot of these things during the same break, I encourage you to act like you're broke. And that's also that excessive shopping. That could even be me preaching to myself, right? And think and focus on the things that you need and not want. And that's really practical from a savings point of view. That's just about it for me, but I just want to leave you with this. This is James 1, verses 2 to 4. It says, "My brothers and sisters, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." What encouragement. Even through this time, we lack nothing. Just think on that. Encourage you, though, as you move forward to manage your finances in and out of COVID. We will continue, I guess, from a church point of view to try to offer this type of assistance. You are always welcome to reach out directly if you've got questions or you need some advice on something and I can assist, or if not directly do that, be able to point you in the right direction. It's easy to find me. I'm just at antoin.bowe@gmail.com, and that is Antoin, there is no E there, .bowe@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to field any of your questions. I thank you for your time, and I hope that some of this information will definitely be able to be used during this environment. Thank you.